Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television with me, Frank Pereira. It is now fairly certain that the April 1st rollout of the grand indirect tax reform goods and services tax isn't happening. The plan seems like it is put on the back burner at least till September, when the time given by the constitutional amendment will automatically expire for GST rollout, meaning that the new regime will have to kick in by then. There are two clear reasons why the GST isn't happening now as planned. One, till now there is no consensus on the contentious issue of dual taxation between the centre and state governments. States, especially like Tamil Nadu and Kerala, are hell-bent on their demand that control of companies with annual turnover of less than 1.5 crore rupees should rest with them. The centre, meanwhile, isn't too comfortable with the idea of giving up too much to the states. There's also the political issue that is in place after demonetization was in place. On this edition of The Big Picture, we'll discuss whether the GST will pass the April 1st deadline and also what is holding the GST back. Joining me on the program today are R. Kavita Rao, Professor, National Institute of Public Finance and Policy; Ajay, former Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, is also an economist; Nitin Desai, former Chief Economic Advisor, Government of India; and Priya Ranjan, Senior Journalist. Thank you so much, lady and gentlemen, for joining me on the program today. Professor Rao, I'd like to start with you, of course, and ask you what is really holding the GST back?
The issue of dual control is an issue which needs to be resolved, not just taking into account the centre's and the state's interests, but the taxpayers' interests as well. The position, therefore, is that we need to make sure that the taxpayer, to the extent possible, faces one tax administration and not two. Bringing a large number of taxpayers into the tax net requires us to simplify the tax system and not make it more complex. In the way the compliance structure for GST is being framed, there is a significant increase in compliance cost. By way of asking all taxpayers to upload information on transaction-by-transaction sales and purchases. So it is important at the same time to make sure that the system is easy to comply with on all other fronts, and making sure that there is a single tax authority to which a taxpayer reports to is important. That having been said, whether it should be the states or the centre, there is an issue that needs to be taken into account. For the centre, given that it's placed at a large distance and has a large number of taxpayers, the issue is, or the focus is on very large taxpayers. For the states, however, the smaller taxpayers are important because they contribute a reasonable amount of revenue from the state's perspective, not so from the centre's perspective. So there is difference in how the centre and the states would perceive this whole issue of dual control. And since the small taxpayers are not important taxpayers for the centre, at one level it makes sense for states to want to control it, although a unilateral position on that would seem unfair.
Indeed, indeed. Mr. Desai, the revenue sharing issues that states like Tamil Nadu and Kerala have raised over these discussions that have been going on for the last few months now, do you believe that those issues are valid concerns of these states?
I would say that there were concerns which the big states had, but I thought most of them had been resolved. In fact, the real problems came initially from the manufacturing states, which wanted that 1%.
Yes.
And that fortunately has been removed. But what the point which Kavita Rao was making is important, that this is going to be a very complex system. Because you're going to give set-offs. Now, if a small vendor is with one SSE, and the big vendor who buys from that small vendor is with another SSE, you'll need a very, very effective interface between the two. Because one guy is being assessed by one entity and the other guy by another entity. And as she says, it appears that compliance requires transaction by transaction recording and reporting. It's as if you had a company which has detailed accounts of the transfers between one plant and another. Now, that's going to be quite a job. I can tell you one thing, even if we get it by 1st April, a pretty large chunk of industry is not ready for it, particularly in the services sector, where they have not used to this type of set-offs which we had in manufacturing VAT earlier. There they are used to it a little bit, but here they are not used to it. I think the real problem on revenue sharing was by and large resolved, and now Frankly, it's a political issue because of demonetization.
Okay.
I mean, from this perspective, demonetization was very poorly timed. If you wanted to do GST, this was not the time to take on a battle with the states, which is what has happened.
So, a couple of issues that were raised. First and foremost, the April 1st deadline and also the political aspect of the entire operation. Would you say that the issue right now is more political than anything else after demonetization?
Let me first say that it's not yet absolutely clear that the central government has given up on introducing or bringing in the GST by 1st of April.
Yeah, the finance minister himself has said that it is still a possibility.
There is a possibility, though yesterday, and all that he said yesterday was there are a couple of issues which we have yet to agree on. But the fact is that it looks like, one, ever since demonetization came in, the pinch being felt in the states, which are closer to the ground than, say, the federal government, is probably much more than has been realized or has percolated upwards to the center, the pain.
Yes.
The second, I think it's made a number of states go against the center when earlier they were probably willing to go along. Here I name the state of West Bengal, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and now murmurs have started even from a few more states. But whether this is bad or good is, I think, a major point, not why it's being deferred. I would just leave the thought. I think the fact that it's not coming in on the 1st of April is giving ample opportunity to go in for a more optimum GST regime than was becoming possible when the thing was being pushed through, saying center and the states are able to come to a conclusion on dual control or jurisdiction just in 20 days' time, when the major power which the states have today in financial scheme of things is only with indirect taxes. Center has direct taxes, plays a major role, but the states had only this.
Yes.
Other income for the states is actually property tax, which goes to the local governments. Now their budgets, the more they realize, saying our budgets are going to be only what's going to come, major entry, receipt from center. And second, what fee and charges which you can levy for tolls and other kind of fees. And the rest of the budget would have been only expenditure. So they are also realizing that we are giving up far too much. And what for are we going to be MLAs or ministers in the state governments?
Indeed.
If we are not going to be having such powers?
Indeed.
He's putting it very politely.
Yeah, you are add something to that, Mr.
No,
Desai?
no, I would just say this one, that yes, they may want to do it in 1st April, but they only have 2 days because they have to pass 3 pieces of legislation. And as Ajay said, it's probably not a bad idea. I do not think industry is ready. I do not think our reporting systems are ready for the complexities of reporting which will be required. The interface between, as I said, the guys will be assessed by the state administrations and the people will be assessed by the... So I'd say, frankly, I personally, as an economist, would say not a bad idea. This will give them some time to work things out.
Our journalist on the panel, someone who's batted very strongly for implementation of GST in the past, I'm sure will have the same kind of an assessment. Is it a blessing in disguise, Mr. Dash?
I would say so. Actually it was very painful and unfortunate for India having missed several deadlines in the past. But this time, I would say, if the April 1st deadline is going to be missed, it will be a blessing in disguise, post-demonetization, I would say. Of course, we know that there is now a constitutional requirement that GST must be implemented by September the 16th, because after that, you won't have the existing indirect taxes. They won't be valid. And if you do not have the new tax system, then you will have a first-rate constitutional crisis.
Because constitutional amendment, Ranjan.
Well,
if it's possible to remove this.
Yes, you could have a constitutional amendment,
Yes.
but as you know, you can't have a constitutional amendment
Without
by
going
an
through.
ordinance.
Of course.
And you do not have, your Parliament after this current session is going to meet at the end of January for the budget session. So if you introduce a constitutional amendment to defer it further,
No. You can do that in April, May. You can do it in the monsoon session also if you
Yeah,
find.
to defer it further.
Yes.
Means
That's not a-
I wouldn't. I actually,
Those are the options, of course.
Actually,
We'll
it
get
would
into
be
the
a
options
bad
in a bit.
idea to
Yes.
defer GST for a while till the economy recovers from the shock administered by this note ban. Because, these kind of radical tax reforms, which were actually in the past decade, any time was a good time for it. But at the moment, this is a very bad time for the kind of this radical tax reforms to actually be implemented. That is because, the economy is now been pushed on a downward spiral. And in this situation, there can't be revenue buoyancy. In fact, it will be fraught with multiple times risk to introduce GST. And that is why this compensation business, which there was a grand bargain between the states on the one hand and the center, that it would be unraveled and would be opened up. Number 4 is, in case there is certain amount of firefighting or damage control that is attempted to give the economy a stimulus, a fiscal stimulus, then you would have to look at the 4-rate structure on GST. There was an agreement on in November that was announced. Now that has to be, you have to have a relook at it, because those rates may not be proper in the change situation when the economy is being pushed downward
Mr. Dua,
and
would you
is
agree with
likely
that?
to suffer a slowdown.
I think the way GST was being brought in, it was not serving the two major objectives for which GST was conceived in 2004 in India,
Yes.
and later on worked upon by various governments. Unifying India into a common market certainly was a major goal, but it was to be done by having what I would call a single unified rate at low rates, not the kind of rates which have been brought in now. 0, 5%, 12%, 18%, 26%, and above that discretionary cesses and a higher rate. We are going to have 6 rates with lots of exemptions. The original idea was very few exemptions, one common rate with a low rate, and looking at the dynamics of the situation, saying at low rate without any cascading effect, because input tax credits would be given at every stage. That will be possible, and more people and more transaction goods get taxed. Now if you see the way it has evolved, because we are working against time deadline, we must have it.
Yes.
We are actually giving up almost all the
Mr.
major
Desai,
objectives.
Have we lost the essence of this entire program somewhere
I
down the
think
line?
the one thing we have gotten is there will be a unified indirect tax system. That will remain. But this point that there are 6 rates, not 4 actually, the 0 and that extra bit which you get on top, is going to restore what I used to see as Chief Economic Advisor, which is continuous lobbying by industry groups for putting themselves in this rate and that rate. You're already seeing it.
Absolutely.
Already the lobbying is starting. So that again will be a bit of a problem. Let me get back to the options a bit now for a bit. The problem that I see is this, that if one of the reasons we are ending up with the present problem is the acrimony, the political acrimony created by demonetization, then I don't see how you'll get an agreement on an amendment. How will you get an agreement on an amendment if you're not able to handle something as simple as jurisdiction? So I would say that, frankly, I would argue that if they don't get their act together, GST may be dead. And because they are not, how are they going to amend it? They must get their act together. They must restore the spirit of cooperative federalism, and then they can probably get it done by September. April is a big ask.
Okay.
GST is a team game. Demonetization is an individual sports.
Okay.
So they do not gel.
Okay.
As simple as that.
Fair enough. Professor Kavita Rao, are you in agreement with what we are saying? Of course, the April 1st deadline looks like it's not going to happen at all. At least there's a very bleak chance of it happening, even if it does. The question is, even maybe the September 2017 deadline, the constitutional bar that is in place might not be met.
Yeah, I agree and disagree at the same time. I increasingly over the years have come to believe that we need to do a GST and get it out of the way, because the longer we wait, the more we seem to be diluting what we propose to do by way of GST. So I think, and till demonetization was implemented, I was firmly of the view that even if it's the ugliest GST possible, we need to get it done and get it out of the way, and we can keep cleaning it up after that. Because over the years, all we have done is to water it down further and further and further. And every department, every government is trying to raise more and more revenues from the present taxes, which means that the ask on GST in terms of revenue is growing by the day, not just as in absolute numbers, but as a percentage of GDP. So in that sense, I was of the view that we should try and do GST and move forward. But at this moment, I think it's a terrible idea to try to do GST, because demonetization, as everybody on the panel has been saying, has really sent the economy into a tizzy. And trying to do a major tax reforms on the face of an economy which is doing badly basically says you don't get revenue, and you are also forcing a large number of taxpayers to adopt and adapt to a completely new regime. So there are compliance costs of transition and there are compliance costs of the new regime, which an economy which is suffering already may not be able to bear. And so we are possibly hitting them both ways, and that I think is not a very smart thing to do.
Okay.
So far as the September deadline is concerned, well, I guess if you want to postpone GST, the only option is to do some kind of a constitutional amendment. Whether the government wants to do an amendment or try to push through GST is a call that they'll have to take.
Okay, fair enough.
I've seen some vague comments by some knowledgeable constitutional lawyers saying, nee, something can be done, though they have not explained what, apart from a new constitutional amendment. But some of them
that seems to be the only, thing that can possibly happen.
Yes, that's what I'm not a constitutional lawyer, so I don't know. But I've seen some remarks by some people saying, don't worry, it can be done.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Dash, yeah.
No, I would like to draw your attention to one aspect, one impact that a delayed GST at this stage, or delayed, or they are not having a date, may have, one impact that may have. You see, typically in a slowdown, in an economic slowdown, the evasion of indirect taxes goes up, because businesses, trade, everybody is under pressure. So there is more tax evasion. That's empirical. That's been seen. Now, following demonetization, as we experience, more black money is being generated by this note ban rather than being curbed.
So it's counterproductive.
So the impact of not having GST from April 1 or in September and delaying it to unforeseeable future. Now, I do not know what will happen to this black money, parallel economy, informal economy situation in this country, because things could be aggravating there, because as we know, GST was supposed to clean up the indirect tax system and would have been a transparent, non-evasion tax system.
Indeed.
So, since that will not happen, or is not, perhaps the atmosphere is not good too, the one bad effect of it will be that this will accentuate the black money situation.
If I had been advising,
yes, please.
If I had been advising, following up on what he's saying, instead of demonetization, I would have used the GST as an excuse to say we must formalize our payment systems. I would have gone with that.
So it is a double one.
It would have happened naturally.
It would have happened naturally. But I could have put a push.
Curbing black money would have happened naturally.
I would have been able to push, saying that we can't
transparency.
implement GST because of the accounting that is involved unless people agree to use the formalized payment systems.
Otherwise, you don't get the tax credit.
Otherwise, you don't get it. And that would have happened. And I would have said, push that hard. You will get, once you get formalized payment systems between people, between companies, businesses, and ultimately it will have to come to companies also. Because if it will have percolated down to the consumer level, I would have said that that would have been a better route to follow to control the black economy. And at some point, if you still felt it worthwhile, okay, do demonetize. But this way has made that much more difficult.
In fact, I would add one more thing here.
Yeah.
You know, as economists, we all realize that direct taxes are more progressive in nature, whereas indirect taxes are regressive. All that it means is the poor get hit by indirect taxes more because the rates are common, it's on commodities, services, etc., whereas direct taxes are on your income levels, etc. Yes. All economies, as they move upwards, the share of direct taxes keeps on increasing. We also, for the first time in 2009, had reached a stage from 1991, when it was 90-10, 90 indirect and 10 direct, to 50-50 when the economy was doing well. Since then, again we've slid. Now with GST, the economic efficiency as well as social efficiency which was to be gained was by keeping the rates low, very few exemptions, higher compliances, and low rates were to come about because cascading was to be removed. There will be no double taxation economy. That's how Dr. Vijay Kelkar and others anticipated 1 to 1.5% increase in GDP. But the way the GST has been brought in, I think we are losing with 6 rates, high rates. Where was the economic efficiency to come about?
Indeed.
I think now it's giving us time to look at our direct taxes along with the indirect taxes and then see what is the way forward. These, I hope, and alongside that is the new phenomena of demonetization, which is the best way to move forward, whether we play around with our GST, with our direct taxes, because right now we are all hearing, because to remove the ill effects or the pain of demonetization, the direct taxes rates will be lowered.
Yes.
That means the share of indirect taxes will become even more.
Even more.
So that's going to be far more aggressive. So I would really urge an overall look at the taxation structure rather than just looking at GST for the sake of it.
Indeed.
Final point,
Yes,
if I can
yes.
just say that, sorry, is while we are doing this, let's also look at, now that we've seen how the states feel about giving up their powers on GST, can we have a unified body? Many countries in the world have it, including the federal ones, which have federal structures, one body for GST, like even enforcing it, apart like the council. Now the enforcement level is also with enforcement work is also with one, which will consist of center, state, everybody there, but it is one body responsible. Then this question of nobody is getting it, nobody is giving up its part. Center here saying, I don't want to give up my role in the service taxes because I've been collecting it.
Indeed.
State saying, if you don't want to do that, then the exemption limit is 1.5 crore rupees, so why should we give up? And as I was mentioning earlier, we discussed, saying that's the only power the states have, financial indirect taxes. So let's look at both the things now, enforcement as well as
I think Ajay's thing will work, provided you are allowed to have a revenue minister still in every state and a revenue secretary still in every state.
Sure.
But a single tax administration is the ideal,
Yeah,
and in some ways. But that will probably be some distance away in our context. And
it's wishful.
So I don't
it's
think
wishful thinking for now.
Let me say frankly, I think the jurisdiction. I think the jurisdiction issue is solvable.
Yes.
It is not a fundamental economic issue. It's largely a matter of working out what makes sense from an administration point of view, given the fact that all taxpayers are going to be highly interconnected with one another because of set-offs. I don't think that is the problem. The problem, frankly, is that states are now not willing to cooperate with the center.
Indeed.
That is the problem.
After the demonetization.
So, Mr. Dash, who's the onus on right now then to ensure that everyone plays along? And you yourself said that it's a team game at the end of the day.
Exactly. GST is a team game, but demonetization was an individual sports. Now, as long as you play individual sports, obviously you
can't expect anyone else to play along
with the team game. That is so far from conceiving one revenue administration, putting states, center and local bodies all together. This will require a grander bargain than Vijay Kelkar had envisaged even for GST, which we haven't reached, and it's being opened up. So, one thing that I would like to, on direct taxes that Mr. Dua was mentioning, you see, in fact, now, both because of what we are, the failure that we can see on the GST front and the impact of the note ban, both on account of both, we know that the direct tax reforms, which were already on the table, are already on card. For instance, Finance Minister has been announcing his roadmap on direct tax reforms in the budget, previous 2 budgets, for instance, like bringing down corporate tax rates to 25% and also looking at individual tax rates and expanding the base.
You have the 2006 direct taxes code to look at.
Yes.
You may not accept everything. Build upon it.
So you have already on the agenda.
Yes.
Even those are now being derailed thanks to note ban, because the best of expectations from note ban hasn't materialized. Two things were to happen.
Yeah.
One was, it was to help expand the tax base. We know by 1 month, a little more than a month of the experience of note ban, that it's not contributing to that. And the number 2 thing was that it was expected to create a fiscal room for the finance minister, at least in this year's budget, so that he could have used that to provide, to bring about direct tax reforms in terms of lower tax rates, stable taxes.
That clearly has not happened.
That's also not happened.
One piece of advice.
I've got 2 minutes on the program, so one at a time, just quick closing comments from all of you. Yes, the
My
point
last closing comment is to government, koi naya dhamaka mat karna.
Okay.
The system is disrupted enough. Please do not come up with some new dhamaka.
Okay. Professor,
My comment is, the big brother has to take the lead in resolving this, and here we know who the big brother is.
Okay, fair enough. And Professor Rao, I'm going to let you have the last say on the program today.
Yeah, well, I believe that while we all wish for a single administration and cleaned up GST, if we delay it further, we are not really going to see more cleanup. Unfortunately, I disagree with the panelists when they say the 13th Finance Commission report on GST was a great one, because it sort of sold an unfulfillable dream to the Indian public. Having said all of that, I still believe that we should have prioritized GST over demonetization. So at the moment, I wouldn't say we should try to even attempt to do GST for at least a year or so.
Is it fair? My final question: is it fair to blame to pin the blame squarely on demonetization?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say no.
Okay.
The states were being pushed into it, and they were expecting far more cooperation from the center, even in fields outside the finance.
Fair enough. Mr. Dash, final in 10 seconds. Is it fair to blame demonetization for all the problems all the economic issues that we are seeing now?
No, you can't. Obviously, not for all the economic issues. The economy was doing badly. A recovery was expected. That there were green shoots, and now you had demonetization or note ban, which has created, made it very complex.
Fair enough. Completely out of time, so I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of the Big Picture there. Thank you so much to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for watching.